Good morning. Lovely. I know we all came back rather late last night. Um, I hope you got some rest, at least a few hours. We have a not so delayed start, just 18 minutes late, but I can understand we had a late night last night. We have an exciting start to the day. We have a keynote by Pramod Varma. Pramod, perhaps most of you know him already, but I will venture to introduce him in like one sentence. And I was telling him his talk will do the rest of the introduction about why he's here. If I could request someone at the back to usher people in, that'd be lovely. Any volunteers who can usher people in, please call them out. So Pramod has been involved with the Aadhaar project in India back in 2009 onwards. And he was the chief architect of Aadhaar. After leaving government a few years later, he has been architecting the entire India stack. And I think what I find compelling about what Pramod has led is that after the first couple of, you do the Aadhaar thing, you do the UPI, you haven't left things there and, okay, I'm done, I'm retiring. Pramod is continually innovating and thinking about the next level of what infrastructure should look like. So I'm excited that we have Pramod here, and I think it'll be fascinating to hear about him talk about the next phase of DPI. Pramod Varma. Thank you.
This is on? It's not on. Okay. Morning. Arcade. Is it on? Okay. Oh, maybe I just have to turn it on. There you go. Good morning. So last night was busy, but fun. I know it's went too late, but thanks for showing up. That's a good set of audience who managed to show up. So we will take a little bit of time. I'm not sure whether the deck is going to show up there. Behind the chairs. So I hope we can get the deck on these two as well. Is possible? That would be very nice. Whether they can get the deck. Maybe not. It's going to get cut a little bit, but it's all right. We can manage. So today I thought we would cover. We have been talking about DPI, digital public infrastructure, but it's a broad term, abstract term. But nevertheless, there are some concrete ideas within the DPI that have been implemented in the last decade and a half across few countries, definitely several countries. Many of the countries are actually here as well today attending. But what we wanted to cover is also where are we going with this? I think the journey is far from complete, and that is the real key point. And for us to be able to scale this to 8 billion people across 190 plus countries, put the user at the center of the design, and give the opportunity for economic growth is a long stretch, and that journey is continuing, and we cannot take our feet off the pedal to make sure that we are continuing there. So just very, very rapid recall from Nandan's keynote yesterday. So if you look at DPI is nothing but a set of reusable infrastructure building blocks that can be used by everyone to build whatever they want to build. So it's like, in the physical world, it's highways, railroads, but in the digital world, it's connectivity, internet itself is a DPI, and identity or payments that are general purpose and reusable. So that's very, very key part of it. So the essence of DPI, just to recall, is about reuse. It's not about building the entire solution by yourself. So digitization is a larger bucket out of that DPI thinking, as Nandan was saying that yesterday, it's a way of thinking, is to extract reusable building blocks out of your solution and make it widely available to the ecosystem for them to be able to build more solutions. So DPI builders are not solution thinkers. They are infrastructure builders that allow them to create general purpose building blocks that can be reused by others. And the reuse is very, very key to deal with diversity. No single solution meets humanity's needs. So you need hundreds and thousands of solutions that can continuously build, evolve, and go on. So to build these solutions, you can get a set of Lego blocks. And those Lego blocks are called really DPI elements. And it consists of three layers, right? A set of open standards and technologies, and well laid out governance and rules of the game, because you can't build a highway and not have a set of rules. So you have to have a set of rules to do what you want to do with the underlying DPI, but real value get unlocked when solution builders start building solutions using the DPI building blocks. That's when the unlocking of value happens. Until then, it's a bunch of, underlying supply side activity, which is not, doesn't care. Nobody cares about that until it becomes various solutions available to people. So if you look at the last 10 years, you will see first identity, registries, KYC, eKYC, authentication. You would have heard these words, all related to identity. That drove massive formalization. And that's what we saw in many, many countries. As you give identity, individuals become visible to the system. So identity was very, very key. And ID4D project and many other projects supported by many of you are belonging there. And that is still going on, but nevertheless, that was a focus of that to bring the informal world to formalized world so that they can start participating. Then we created frictionless payments on top of that, primarily in the last decade, focusing on G2P, government to person, benefits transfer and other payments, and of course, some P2P and P2M, like PICS, DPI in India, they're all P2M, merchants as well. And that allowed a lot of people to actually participate. Again, remember, these are all happening, if you look at world size of the whole universe, of people, this is still happening to a small set of people. Okay, so remember, we still have a long way to go, and a lot of efforts are happening around the payment world. So we have projects, many projects that are in the open source as well, that are actually supporting some of this. Then we began to navigate into data sharing. And that's a little bit complex. And that's still early. I would presume it's still early in many places. So open finance and the financial sector, for sure, open finance started pushing. So Brazil has done a good job. Some of the European countries have started navigating. India has set up account aggregator that is an open finance network, basically starting to give data back to the individual. And that idea that personal data belongs to individuals and SMEs, the companies, and open data belongs to the society is yet to fully materialize. Without that, no observability exists either. So nothing we can do if open data doesn't come out, data-driven decision doesn't happen, and when it comes to personal data, the data starts to become an asset, economic asset for individuals. Still early. I think it's still beginning, but nevertheless, very, very good strides have been made. So if you really look at the essence of the three areas of entire my journey, at least, have been in the 15 years, have been focusing on user at the center, but fundamentally starting to answer three core questions. Who am I? What do I have? And then what do I do with it? And if you don't ask these three questions fundamentally, we start to get very system-centric view. My platform, my solution, my portal and all that thing is nothing to do with me. It's to do with the people. Okay, remember, it's always to do with who you are meeting this for. So if you put that person at the center, or the SMEs, when I say person, legal persons as well, the identities, identity of individuals, identity of institutions, identity of things. Because in the digital realm, when transactions happen, trust cannot be established unless I know my counterparty. So identity becomes very, very key part of that journey. It's not just about people identity. That is only one part of it. But institutional identities, functional identities, identity of things. India is doing identity of cattle, for example. Livestock, identifying them, ensuring they are tracked, immunization or other things are tracked, right? Provenance around the data is actually tracked. But I want to talk a little bit about digital assets because identity has been well talked about. Digital assets where money, data becomes literally an economic asset, but also converting and digitizing real world assets. This is very, very key. If you look at agriculture, if you look at new energy transition, the significant amount of capital investment going into creating assets. Now, these are not assets owned by very mega corporation. These are micro assets owned by individuals or SMEs. But if you don't convert them into verifiable, user-controlled, transactable assets, those assets become they don't sweat. The assets become very costly to manage. You can't sweat your assets and get best out of what you can do in terms of getting insurance, in terms of getting lending offers around your asset. You cannot do any of those. You can't get a crop insurance if your asset is not verifiable and transactable. So there is much effort that's going on. I want to talk a little bit of that. How do we go about thinking that? And this is today's data sharing is a very, 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 that idea that data belongs, I'm talking about personal data. Personal data means data that contains identifiers. Identifiers of companies and individuals. Those type of data has to be converted back to an economic asset in the hands of people as we talked. But the notion that the data, most of the system builders, many of you, including in your mind, might imagine the data belongs to the system. For example, we hear this saying, oh, healthcare data is in the ministry's database. It is owned by the government. It's not owned by the government. It should not be owned by the government. Data should be individual data. Transaction data or credit should be owned by the individuals. Now, ownership might be tricky, but definitely accessible. Ownership we don't have to debate, but access cannot be debated. That means individuals like us, we must have access to our own data. As when that access comes, the last free user control flow has to happen. That's where today's system is broken. Making a controversial statement purposely. Today, data sharing infrastructure today is broken. And the way we are thinking is actually slightly broken because we forgot to put user at the center. And think from the user's perspective. And what kind of data? Identity data, all kinds of data, certificates and documents. Many people, birth certificate, marriage certificate, trade licenses. We live in the world, academic certificates or all kinds of healthcare certificates and so on. And then, of course, affiliations and entitlements data and transaction data. When I say data, I talk about all four categories of data. Okay, all four categories of data that an individual must have access to. But today, on the left, if you look at, our imagination of data sharing is the way we think about is a system in which my data belongs, needs to share that with another system, and hence we try to create system-to-system data sharing architecture. Let me say that again. Today, our thinking of data sharing is between system to system, of course with the user's consent, because you can't share personal data without consent, but with consent, a system to system sharing. Now the problem with that model, it works. By the way. When I say limited, I'm pushing, when I say broken, I'm purposely being pushy. I'm saying that for a reason. Because today, any system, if you are running a system, or if I'm running a system, if I need to open up my data through, how do I open up? Through a set of APIs, application programming interfaces. I have to worry. If I'm a system custodian, I have to worry about who's going to access this API. Will there be cybersecurity threats? Will there be unwanted access? So the more and more I think about it, the more conservative I become and the more closed it becomes. Okay, invariably, system-to-system data sharing becomes very, very closed. That means the system, not user, remember, the system, custodian of that data, is deciding who will get access to that data. Now, when it comes to cross-border, impossible. This entire thing falls apart. Model falls apart. Inside the country itself, it falls apart because one department won't share data with other department, and one subnational jurisdiction won't share data with another subnational jurisdiction. So what's going to happen? Finally, what is happening? WhatsApp become the biggest data sharing platform. Because we don't allow users to access nor share when we put up our system. Because we say, who is accessing? Oh, that department can't access. Oh, this company can't access. Everybody can't access. Finally, users saying, screw it. I'm going to download and share it on WhatsApp. That's what happens. That's what's happening with money today, by the way. You can take cash and go across the border and actually use it. Printed money. But you can't do digitally. So in digital, I have making an argument. When we digitized, we forgot, for various reasons, we forgot to really ask the fundamental questions. How can user have gained the control back? And unless you put that, you will never see a humanity-scale data sharing infrastructure. WhatsApp is the only way to do, or email attachments, or whatever I need to do, right? So this flips the model from a system-to-system data sharing to user becoming the conduit for data. That means every system that user is interacting with will provide a copy of that data. But when I say copy of the data, the bottom is very key. It is basically provided in a credentialed manner. What is credentialed manner? It means it is digitally signed so that it is tamper-proof and verifiable even when I move the data. That means I can take the copy of the data, immunization certificate, birth certificate, bank statement. Once it is cryptographically protected, digitally signed, I can take a copy, and even if I share using WhatsApp or any other channels, the integrity of that data remains true. And that's the power of cryptographic technique. And we can actually leverage that fully. And that kind of model is the only one which will go back to, in one sense, originally how we used to be. Today, when we travel across the world, when many of the Indian students go to Europe, or many of your children go to study somewhere, they carry physically certificates, health certificates and academic certificates, because the two countries won't have system-to-system sharing, period. But, unfortunately, those documents are not verifiable. Today is a paper certificate. So we either go back to paper or no sharing. We are proposing something in the middle to make sure that we can continue to behave like user is in control as if we were moving our own data, but the data is now credentialed. That means it is tamper-proof and verifiable. And that's very, very powerful. because it dramatically reduces the cost. We have began, at CDPI, we have began a working paper called User-Centric Approach to the, if you want to scan that, you can scan. All of you are most welcome. I really need your inputs and suggestions, and it will be all attributed to your name. So, you will a fully attributed contribution. Please go to that document and provide inputs. We are trying to put together what does it mean to create a humanity scale data sharing with the user at the center. And this is very, very key. And this is not to throw away what we are doing today. This is how we want to see the future evolving. And now, the next phase. I'm giving you the sort of next 10 years, what you're going to see, okay? So don't tell me I didn't tell you. Okay, so the next one is that we launched this in April. Nandan alluded to that yesterday. This is a global effort between BIS and Nandan Nilekani and Augustine Karsten from BIS chief actually co-authored this paper called the Finternet, and we co-authored second paper, and we have a lot of efforts going on around the world. You can go to finternetlab.io. It's early, very early, but I'm giving you a sneak preview. You're very privileged. You're getting an early preview of what's going on. Basically creating a universal infrastructure for financialization of any assets. So if you really look at any technology, and this is a key point I want to drive into your mind, all technologies move from purpose-specific to purpose-generic. If you look at, we had cameras, we had microphone, we had typewriter, all of them got collapsed into a programmable environment called the smartphone. The camera is programmable today. Microphone is programmable, right? We don't have separate devices. By the way, same thing happened before internet. If you read the history of internet, there was separate effort called SNAs and different in a networking stack, different operating systems, different networking, different routers, different switches, custom built full stack networking. All got disappeared when it collapsed into TCP/IP and HTTP subsequently, which gave the birth to the internet. And internet completely generalized the underlying moving of data, and that allowed programmability on top of it. And then the next 20 years happened. Now we watch streaming movies and everything else on top of internet because somebody actually put their heads together to actually generalize and collapse the technologies into generic purpose. And that's what Finternet is all about. Finternet is removing purpose-specific infrastructure requirements, G2P payment, card payment, ATMs, lending, tokenization, asset management, data management, by the way, user-centric data sharing, all of them at one shot is going to be generalized. So if I'm making a bold claim, if this dream comes true, the dream of a very large set of people, this will be bigger than internet. How it is going to turn out for humanity at one shot as a universal infrastructure that can bring. And that requires a lot of calibrated design and choices. And the reason why I think it's today, you can go beyond credentialing. We talked about digitization, which is digitizing the data in your database. We talked about credentialing, which is converting the data into a cryptographically protected asset and giving back to the user. That's credentialing. And tokenization is the next phase where credentialed with a ledger at the back. Why is ledger? It's very, very key because there are many scenarios where singleness has to be meant like money. If I can't have data, I can make, certificates, your birth certificate, you can make multiple copies of it. And if you can make multiple copies of money, we wouldn't be sitting around, hanging around here, I think, and we would be making, printing our own money. We can't. Singleness of many type of assets is a very, very key, and hence the ledger. I won't bore you with a lot of details, but remember, the technology over the last 15 years has brought us to a state where we can now imagine all forms of assets to be credentialized and tokenized in the hands of the people. And that bring, that means user control assets. What is user control assets? Like music, content economy, creator economy. You talked about creator economy. Today, they cannot monetize. Individuals cannot monetize that well, including Taylor Swift talking about, some of that, right? The power, even the biggest content creators finding it very, very hard to monetize correctly. User control asset, attested assets, like paintings, with an attestation coming from a gallery like Sotheby, for example, saying, yeah, I'll give you the provenance of the painting. How do I then credential it, tokenize it, so that it becomes transactable? Registered assets like land and vehicles, and regulated assets. And that, one of the biggest example of Finternet we are working on is carbon credits and green financing, by the way, because that's where entirety system is broken and highly expensive, repeated verification, tons of paperwork, and a lot of intermediary charges. Okay, so we are basically one of the biggest use cases of Finternet is also the financing of those assets. So I'm bringing back. So I'll bring transactions, then I'll run through very important part of the transaction economy. Why is it important? Because once I have my identity, my assets, what do I do with it? Today, if you look at the markets, this is Brazil, Nigeria, Indonesia, Mexico, India is no different. Extremely fragmented market. Extremely fragmented, inefficient, low performing, high asymmetry markets playing out everywhere. All markets, by the way. And we have to move from a fragmented, offline, informal, low productivity, micro economies that is actually happening much of global south towards a high performance, unified mega economy. That is not by centralizing it. And that centralization of platform thinking creates monopolies. Remember, if you create a mega platform that can allow transactions or commerce or taxi booking or hotel booking, anything, eventually creates monopolies or duopolies. So we have to, again, go back to the internet, go back to the basics. How do you think about a non-platform way of architecting transaction economy like an internet? Decentralized networks of transactions. And I'll skip that. And one of the efforts that is happening around the world is actually a multi-domain, multi-platform, open commerce platform. The network, this is actually live and running. We crossed 100 million orders. 100 million orders, 12 million orders per month. It's actually not anymore a theory on paper. It was theory in 2018. It's no more a theory. It is actually live. It's using protocol called Beckon protocol. And then we have a live network today. Last year, we went live with one of the earliest efforts in the world to create a unified energy network through which you can do interoperable EV charging, micro energy trades between you and your neighbor across a microgrid. Completely programmable energy grids are being created, actually live. These are live networks, by the way, all using Beckon protocol. And there's one in Kenya that is coming up now for the agriculture, and one in Gambia, and one in Brazil, Belém. These networks are already up and running. These are decentralized with no mega intermediary in the middle. Decentralized open network that allows transaction between two parties. It's happening on every domain as we speak. Every domain. And this is happening around the world. We have 60 projects. All done by open source communities. All done by open source communities and my local entrepreneurs, including Amsterdam. We have a taxi booking network and a network that went live in Amsterdam by local entrepreneurs who is actually creating decentralized taxi booking. Very, very powerful imagination. That's possible. And then I'll end with this. I know I have seriously time up, but why AI? And people ask this question, where is AI playing into this? Is that there are two sides of it. And we use the word, I purposely use the term DPI to the power of AI. It's not DPI plus AI. That is the reason, because you can actually supercharge every DPI implementation we are doing today. Even PIX or in UPI in India, UPI, one of the largest success stories, has only reached 500 million people. Only, I say, because you still have 700 million people just in India not participating yet. Think about it. How do you get the next billion people to participating in transaction economy? Not watching YouTube or TikTok, because they all can watch entertainment, but they cannot fill a form. They cannot make a choice about which insurance product, what do they want. Transacting requires a lot more closure of understanding information, decision making, knowing what to do. And that's where we think we are going to brilliantly play out AI. Make it efficient, remove the barriers, and so on. And one of the biggest effort is also, we have some efforts in Africa as well, as removing language barrier, because English is not a natural language. So if people are building, and we have, Abhishek Singh and all here from India, India is doing a massive effort called Bhashini, 22 official languages, all democratized. And there are 4 democratization happening as we speak in India and Africa. With the Gates Foundation effort, we are hoping to see this in Africa as well very soon. Is democratization of compute, democratization of data, democratization of models, and allowing local, low-cost, tiny, new generation AI models and LLMs to fall in place. And we believe that is going to coexist with large models. Okay, this is not a replacement for OpenAI. Okay, this is a coexistence strategy that we can't bet everything on the mega model. We need micro models. Micro models need data, compute, and fine-tuning. And that's what, there is a lot of effort that's going on around it. Please read up. And to end with, I want to say this, and this is something which I personally will lose sleep. The way we do today, one use case at a time, one system at a time, one country at a time, we'll all be dead and gone. And the world will be still trying to digitize. And that's not a favorable thing. I want to be able to say today's approach of one country, one use case, one system will not take us to meet the aspirations of 8 billion people. We must find a better way to create, faster way to roll out. Here is an effort that some of us are actually leading with. On the DAS side, you can scale that. I think the deck will be available later as well. But I want to end with this. We must think universal. We cannot be building one at a time. And if you want universality of the infrastructure, it cannot be a platform. Because who controls the platform? Which country will control it? Who will run it? So it has to be a protocol and standards. Remember, that is why internet is universal. You don't have a separate internet that we have. You just show up, plug it in, and you are on email today in Cairo. Is reason because the underlying infrastructure is not a set of platform. Underlying is built using protocols and standards. GSM, same reason. Why I can pick up the phone and call any of you and voice transfer across the world. Because protocols. Think protocols, think like internet. Unless we allow the universality of infrastructure, we will never get to 190 countries, people. So I want you to really, really think forward, and time for action for a lot of us to implement, but come along and watch a lot of this and participate in many of this effort. All these efforts are open source, and really, really encourage you to participate. Thank you so much. Sorry, team.
Thank you, Pramod. That was fantastic. We have 3 sessions that are starting next. In this room, there's a digital sovereignty session. In another room, we have a session on GovStack, and then there is a DPI mapping effort going on elsewhere. So for those people that are participating in the high-level panel, I invite you to come up, and we'll get started in just a few minutes.